My name's Daniel Cooper. I was 29, working at a mid-sized marketing firm in Chicago. Not glamorous, not huge, but it was my dream job. The kind of place where ideas mattered, or at least that's what I thought. The office smelled like burnt coffee and desperation. Printers jammed more often than they worked, and the vending machine ate quarters like it was on commission. But for me, every pitch meeting was a chance to prove myself. I'd started at the bottom, data entry, cold calls, late nights. No complaints. I believed in hard work. And slowly, people noticed. My campaigns were getting attention. Clients were happy. I wasn't just good at the job. I lived for it. Then came Mark Benson, the new regional manager. Perfect suit, perfect smile, and the personality of a malfunctioning photocopier. He had one rule: never outshine him. At first, I didn't see it. I thought we were on the same side. Until the first big presentation.
It was a huge client, a tech startup worth millions. I'd spent 3 weeks perfecting the pitch, slept in the office twice, ate instant noodles, and dreams. The morning of the meeting, I walked in early, coffee in one hand, USB drive in the other. Mark was already there, scrolling through my slides. "Impressive work," he said without looking up. I smiled. "Thanks, Mark. I think this could land us the—" He cut me off. "Us? You mean me." I laughed, thinking he was joking. He wasn't. When the clients arrived, Mark stood at the front and presented my entire pitch, word for word. My data, my visuals, my tagline. And when they shook hands, he didn't even look in my direction. The deal closed. The company celebrated. Mark got a promotion. I got a pat on the back and a $25 Starbucks gift card. That should have been my first warning, but I stayed because I believed in karma. And because I didn't know, the worst was still coming. A few months later, I got called into HR. Mark sat there with that smug little grin. "Daniel," he said, "we've noticed your behavior is becoming disruptive." "Disruptive?" I asked, confused. "You've been talking to upper management about new ideas, expanding your department. That's not your place." I blinked. "You mean being ambitious?" He smiled. "Exactly. Too ambitious." And just like that, I was fired. No warning, no explanation. Just a cold 2-line email that ended my 5 years at the company. I packed my desk in silence while Mark stood by the door. "You'll land somewhere," he said, "just not higher than here." That line hit harder than the firing itself. Outside, snow was falling, the kind that soaks your shoes and your pride. I stood on the sidewalk, holding a cardboard box of my career, watching my reflection in the glass doors. They say when one door closes, another opens. But no one talks about the hallway in between. The long, cold hallway where you start to doubt everything. 2 weeks later, I got a call from an old client, Amber Lee. She ran a boutique design agency that had worked with us before. She'd heard I was gone. "Mark screwed you over, didn't he?" she asked. I didn't deny it. She laughed softly. "Good. Then maybe it's time you screw him back, the smart way." Amber was the one who gave me the idea. Not revenge through rage. Revenge through success. We started small. Consulting work, side contracts, small business clients who couldn't afford big agencies. Within a year, my little 2-person operation had 6 employees and 3 major clients. By year 2, we were getting attention from the same corporate sharks that once ignored me. And guess who called me one morning? Mark.
He didn't recognize my number. "Hey, Dan, long time no see. I'm reaching out because our firm might need your agency's help on a few campaigns." My agency. the same firm that had fired me for being too ambitious. I smiled at my reflection in the office window. Outside, the city lights looked like opportunity. "Sure," I said. "Let's set up a meeting." Because this time, I wasn't walking into his office. He was walking into mine. The office was silent. Everyone stared at me like I was already gone. My nameplate was still on the desk, but it felt like it belonged to a ghost. I packed my things, one coffee mug, a notebook full of ideas he'd called too ambitious, and a framed photo of the team I thought was family. When I walked out, he didn't even look up, just kept typing, like firing me was a routine chore between meetings. Outside, the air felt heavier than it should have. I stood there in the parking lot holding that box, watching the building I helped build, and I swear it felt like it was laughing at me. That night I couldn't sleep. Every word he said replayed in my mind. "You don't fit here anymore." Not "thank you," not "good luck," just a clean cut, like I was nothing. But anger is funny. At first it burns you, then it shapes you. By sunrise, I wasn't broken anymore. I was dangerous.
I spent the next few days digging. Not for a new job, but for information. I knew how the company ran. I knew every weakness, every overdue deal, every client they'd mistreated. The boss, let's call him Richard, built his empire on arrogance. He underpaid staff, overpromised clients, and hid numbers behind fake smiles. But numbers don't lie, and I had copies of everything. I called one of our biggest clients, a tech startup I'd landed 6 months earlier. When they heard I'd been fired, they were furious. Turns out, they liked me more than they liked him. They said, "If you ever start your own firm, call us first." That sentence hit me harder than any insult he'd thrown. For the first time in days, I smiled. Because that's when it clicked. I didn't need his desk. I could build my own table. I sold my car, emptied my savings, and rented a tiny office, just enough space for a desk, 2 chairs, and a dream. I named my company New Edge Consulting. Catchy, right? Simple, but sharp, like the revenge I was about to serve. For weeks, I worked night and day. Cold coffee, instant noodles, and pure focus. Clients started calling, one by one. Then that same tech startup signed a full contract. That deal changed everything. Money started coming in, people started noticing, and the name New Edge started showing up in places Richard couldn't ignore. Then one morning, I got an email from him. "Let's talk. I might have an offer for you." I stared at the screen for a long minute, half laughing, half fuming. After all the humiliation, he wanted to hire me back. He didn't even realize I owned the company competing against him. But I wasn't ready to strike. Not yet. Revenge isn't just about winning. It's about timing. So I replied, "Sure. Let's talk. I'd love to hear your offer."
And that's when the real plan began. But that wasn't the best part, because what he didn't know was that I already owned a piece of his company, and he'd handed it to me himself. A few months passed. Business was booming. New Edge Consulting wasn't just surviving, it was dominating. The same clients Richard had taken for granted were now coming to me. But that email from him, that was my golden ticket. See, back when I worked for Richard, he'd made a mistake, a legal one. To dodge taxes, he'd quietly transferred a few company shares under random employee names, mine included. At the time, I didn't even realize it, until my lawyer pointed it out. Turns out, I owned 5% of his company. Not enough to control it, but enough to make some very interesting moves. I met him at his own office. He didn't recognize me at first, not right away. I'd traded my worn-out work clothes for a sharp suit and quiet confidence. He stood, smiled awkwardly. "Well, look who made it. Let's talk opportunities." I sat down, folded my hands, and smiled back. "Sure, but I think there's something you should know before we start." He frowned, confused. I slid a document across the table. Proof of my shares, my new holdings, and a fresh acquisition contract. His face turned pale. "What? What is this?" I leaned in. "This is your severance letter. You're fired." The silence that followed? Priceless. He tried to speak, but his voice cracked. For once, he was the one packing up his desk. And I didn't say a word. Just like he did to me that day. When I walked out of that building, it didn't feel like revenge anymore. It felt like justice, quiet, clean, and deeply satisfying. Outside, the morning sun hit the glass doors just like it did the day I was fired. But this time, the reflection staring back at me wasn't broken. It was free. People say ambition is dangerous. They're wrong. Arrogance is. Ambition builds empires. Arrogance burns them down. And Richard, he learned that the hard way. Now, every time I walk past that office, I remember his words, "You don't fit here." And he was right. I never did, because I wasn't meant to work for him. I was meant to replace him. Sometimes life pushes you out of places you've outgrown, painfully, unfairly, and without warning. But maybe that's the universe's way of saying, build your own door, then lock the old one behind you. If you enjoyed this story, hit that like button and tell me, what would you have done in my place?